There's an offensive concept that crept its way into the NBA last season, and it's suddenly become a staple in nearly every team's playbook. Here's the play at its most basic. It starts with a simple pick and roll toward the middle. Simultaneously, the player in the corner cuts through and then gets replaced by the player on the wing. So it's super simple cutting and filling, but look at what this does to Colin Gillespie. He's taught to sit in this driving gap to discourage any penetration from Murray, but he's also guarding Hardaway, whose drift to the corner drags Gillespie out of the gap and allows Murray to get downhill for a layup. So that's the basic goal of this play: clear the gaps and create driving lanes for ball handlers. Pritchard wants to help on the Kolek drive here, but Bridges' respacing drags him away from it, and that's another layup. And how many times have we seen Cason Wallace get this exact steal by stunting at a driver? Look at him take it away from Murphy on this one, or this stunt and recover with the no-look steal. That's ridiculous, and it's this type of gap defense where players like Cason make their living. This is like his thing. But notice the off-ball players here. They're stationary, whereas with this play, he's too worried about the shooter on the move. Now Book can drive the gap, and he eventually finds the target on the lob. And I mean, this is just tough, because in a normal pick and roll, the gap defender is supposed to slow down that drive to allow the on-ball defender to recover. But with no gap defender, the guy guarding the ball gets hit by a screen, the ball handler is getting downhill, so the big has to step up, and this ends in a poster where the corner cut not only opens up the spacing, but also dragged Rui under the rim just for him to get destroyed by a flying Adebayo. That just feels mean. With one hand. Okay, watch Tristan da Silva this time, who gets pulled out of the gap to free up the lane. It's another dunk for the big, but wait, where's the help here? Because even with the driving gap clear, there should still be help on the weak side, right? And that brings us to the next part of this play, which is this weak side lift by Duncan Robinson that puts Franz in a really tough spot here. Should he tag the roll, or should he stay with the elite shooter and hope that Goga in AB can stop the screening action? He chooses to go with Robinson, and that's why there's no tag, and that leads to the dunk. But if we watch the Cavs defend this play, they do it differently here, and Lonzo actually will take that roll, but now look at that lift. Yegor's wide open, and there's no way Lonzo or anyone on the Cavs can close out to this in time, although it is a nice effort by Larry Nance Jr. I respect it. So Yegor nailed that three, but imagine if he had just stayed in the corner. It'd be a lot easier for Lonzo to recover from the tag to the corner rather than the tag to the wing, and that exact recovery is something we see all the time in the NBA. We can see Mark Williams execute that same thing here, and this play works to make that closeout much longer for the defense. So far we've seen this play open gaps for drivers, as well as put the weak side help in a really tough spot with this lift, but it also creates a ton of wide open corner threes, and it's for a very simple reason. We've seen this gap defender get moved out of the gap over and over here, but a lot of the time that defender will choose to just stay home to stop the drive. Now we see the corner cut and the corner fill, and that creates the wide open look. And I like that teams don't have to call this play as a set or an ATO. It's more of just a principle. Like here, Phoenix just flows into this screening action. There's that same cut and fill. Book gets the step, and watch the defender in the gap. He stunts at the drive and tries to get back to his guy, but that drift to the corner makes that closeout too long, and Gillespie just doesn't miss this season.
Like that was the issue.
The Clippers actually start this one with a zoom action that gets Harden downhill, and look at Larson in the gap to help, but when he recovers to his man, he's just not there anymore. He's in the corner, Pella, and there are plenty of examples of defenders just looking lost like that against this play. Check out Lou Dort here, just full panic mode, looking at the ghost of Dylan Brooks. Still an air ball though, come on Dylan. This time it's Shea helping in the gap, losing his guy, and this is great against teams like the Thunder who are just conditioned to be in the gap. It's in their nature. It's like they were born in the gaps, and this play helps counter that idea. It doesn't create a corner three on this one, but it creates a different advantage, because watch Keyshawn George here, who isn't super deep in the gap, so it's not going to be that wide open three, but Giddey can just stampede this catch to attack the closeout, and he drops a dime to Vooch. And this play is literally in every team's playbook at this point, like I said, so defenses are obviously aware of it, and here you can see Jamal Murray tries to stop the corner three, so he's helping on the shooter, but now his man is open on the corner cut. It just feels like someone is always open with this.
3 points. Great pass underneath.
This time it's Donovan Mitchell who looks off the kick out, Wiggins jumps to it, and there's that corner cut again. This is just demoralizing. I really like this one where the first action gets blown up, so the Raptors just flow into this. Ingram gets to the elbow and draws help. Reeves takes the corner, and that's a really nice pass by Ingram, looking to the corner and then dropping it off to Scottie for the easiest bucket of his career. The Pistons start this off out of the deep corner inbounds. They lob it into Duren, and again, this is a zoom action for Cade. Here comes that gap help from Derek White, and these passing reads are just really simple, especially for a guy like Cade Cunningham. Now at this point, this play might feel pretty unstoppable, but contrary to what I've shown so far, it's actually not. So let's see some possessions where the play fails and find out what causes it. So the most obvious trade-off with this play is that although it can remove the gap defender, it also sends a cutter into the defense. So instead of Shepherd stopping the drive in the gap, he'll stay with his guy and allow a little bit of penetration, but Nembhard can step up to stop it. And yes, that leaves Brown open for a second on the cut, but now you have a 6'4" guy trying to finish against the trees, and that's probably not going to work. Here's that same concept where Nembhard is going to stay with the shooter, and Ethan Thompson is just not really going to respect this cut. Instead, he'll help at the rim, and now nobody's really open here. And let's compare those two plays with the very first one I showed in the video where Murray gets the layup, and watch the difference with the corner defender Royce O'Neal here, who feels that cut and sinks to fully cover it, and look how far under the rim that pulls him. This is the same thing that got Rui yammed on before, and I think that defender just needs to be a little higher up on the court, like the position of Donovan Mitchell here, to get the ball out of the driver's hands. I think even Donovan could be higher there, but at least he's focused on helping rather than staying attached to the cutter. This time Jarris Walker's in that spot, and he just ends up swatting the layup attempt. So I think having the gap defender stay attached to his guy and using the corner defender as a helper is certainly one viable option, although it does still allow the ball handler to get deeper in the paint than defenses typically want. So here's the other, probably much sexier but harder to pull off way of defending it. They do keep that gap defender there, and now instead of having the corner defender stay with the cut or help in the paint, he switches out to the corner fill while the gap defender switches onto the cutter. That is beautiful. There are no openings there. It's similar stuff here where Murray has to contest the pull-up, and now Brown has these two guys, and he's going to switch to Murray's guy, and Murray can scramble out to Fears. Now, it should be noted that this has to be executed nearly perfectly to work, because if these two defenders aren't on the same page about switching, you end up with stuff like this where Jamal takes the shooter and Johnson was never even thinking about the cutter. So it is tough to pull this one off, and honestly seems a little too difficult to be viable every time, but it's something to think about, and it is super cool when it works. The Lakers play, that is doing something for me. It's also interesting to think about how you would counter this as the offense too, because if Fears had clocked this switch by Brown, the right move would probably be to just stay in the corner or maybe hang out in the dunker, just be available rather than continuing to cut through the defense. And if he had just stayed in the corner, well, then it would just be a pick and roll with no off-ball movement, and we'd be right back to where we were before this play became popular. And speaking of, I do think it's important to compare this version of the pick and roll versus the old style. So I'll welcome you back to 2017, where teams are still taking long mid-range jumpers like this. Blake Griffin is still a Clipper, and during a pick and roll, there are three totally stationary off-ball players, and it wasn't that every player always just stood in place like that. This weak side lift during a pick and roll has certainly been around for a while, but for the most part, this is pretty much how pick and rolls and just spacing in general has looked in the NBA. The gap defense forces a pickup, there's the kick to the corner, and Griffin can still close out to that and get a decent contest. And this is by no means a bad shot. It's a catch and shoot rhythm three by a good shooter. So offenses looked at this like, okay, great, that's a fine shot, maybe even a good shot, but this contest by Blake Griffin definitely makes it a tougher shot than the wide open corner threes we saw earlier. But this is just how spacing looked for a long time in the league. At least it did look that way up until last season, when the Memphis Grizzlies introduced this respacing system, which I believe is commonly referred to as the wheel, because the spacing is rotating in that continuous circle.
What was so weird about their offense?
Like if one guy drives right, the whole thing moves right.
But Memphis ran a system without ball screens. They would just pick a direction to drive, and then everyone would respace according to where the driver went. Whereas the 24-25 Cavaliers used this concept, but in their pick and roll offense, as Coach Johnny Bryant explains here.
The focus is moving out the basketball, right? So in order for Caris to be able to get to the paint, if Donovan stays there, his man is going to help, right? And the driving gap is not as big. But because Donovan is the player that he is, teams are not going to leave him. So you see just right there, he goes, denies Donovan. So now there's a driving lane, but he turns his back to the basketball so he can't see where the pass is made. And now Donovan goes and fills the corner from where George just cut from.
And so now this season, these spacing concepts are basically all the rage in the NBA right now. Miami's running a very similar style to what we saw in Memphis last season, and as we've seen in the video, basically every team has incorporated these concepts into their pick and roll game. In fact, I'd love to know how many pick and rolls this season had these spacing concepts versus how many had the guy stay in place. It certainly feels like the old stand still and hold your spacing and let one guy cook style is starting to fade away, maybe just a little bit. But that is going to do it for today's video. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment telling me what you think of this concept, and I will see you in the next one.